Hey guys, Chase from CSL. How you doing? Um, I have got one heck of a story to tell you today. This is the story of Katherine Knight and John Price and all of Katherine's lovers in the middle. She is the first woman in Australian history to get life without the possibility of parole, and that was in 2001. So you can imagine the long history of women who have went to prison there, and they have never gotten life with no parole. So the crimes had to be pretty heinous, which they are. I am a pretty big murder mystery horror buff, and the stuff that I read in here blew my mind. So, without further ado, sit back, grab a snack, turn the lights off, and let's go through this crazy, crazy life of Katherine Knight. Katherine was born in Aberdeen, New Wales in 1955, and this sweet looking lady committed some of the craziest stuff you are going to hear on YouTube. I didn't even know this murder existed until I started researching just crazy murders throughout history and stuff like that. But so Katherine grew up in a pretty dysfunctional environment. Her mom, Barbara, was pretty promiscuous and had multiple affairs when Katherine was younger. And she found a man by the name of Ken Knight, who was a pretty rough alcoholic. He would make Katherine's mom, Barbara, perform bad things, R-word, up to 10 times a day, I read. And so Katherine wasn't growing up in like a healthy family environment, to say the least. The weird thing is that Barbara, Katherine's mother, would confide in Katherine when she was 10 or 11 years old of this stuff that was going on in the household, and with very explicit details. So, I don't know what mom would tell their younger daughter explicitly what was happening to her, but she did, and the roles kind of reversed, and Ken Knight started doing the same things to Katherine as a child. But the problem is, when Katherine would go confide in her mom said, and I quote, "Put up with it and stop complaining." So during her childhood, Katherine was sexually abused. She was around parental figures who weren't teaching her really anything as parents, and she was having a really rough childhood. So Katherine went to high school at Muswell Brook High School. I hope I said that right. And her friends, so-called friends, considered her a pretty big loner, and they also said she was a bully. I don't know about you, but if I grew up in a household like that, not to justify her actions, but I might be a loner and potentially standoffish myself. So it sounds like she didn't do too well in high school. She left high school when she was 15, and this was before she could read or write. So that's super weird to me. I don't know how you can make it to high school at age 15 and still not be able to read or write. So her IQ, I don't know how high or low it was, but she left, couldn't read or write, and she got a job at a clothing factory as a cloth cutter. So I guess she would cut the cloth and send it off to be made into different shirts and pants and whatnot. But about a year after leaving high school, Katherine got what she described as her dream job. And that was being a butcher at a local butcher shop downtown Aberdeen. And her job was to cut the offal up. Offal. Now, what is offal or offal, you ask? Because I asked. That is the organs in an animal, and I guess certain parts of it were used for food. But that's what she was doing as a living, and she absolutely loved it, which is kind of strange to me that her dream job was cutting up dead animals and specifically the organs. The weird part here is she got her own butcher knife set when she got promoted at this job, and she would hang her butcher knives above her bed every single night and said that she was keeping them handy if she needed them. And this actually continued all the way up until her incarceration, which that's strange to me. I don't know about you guys, but unless the girl is extremely, extremely beautiful, I am most likely not going to sleep in that bed with butcher knives hanging above it. But I guess it didn't scare off every guy, because later on she met David Stanford Kellett, and this was in 1973. He was also an alcoholic, but his reasons were, I guess, a little more justifiable. Kellett there was a train wreck, and he had rescued like 6 kids, and another 6 of them died, and he saw all of that, so I guess he was really traumatized. So he drank a lot, but they had a pretty tumultuous relationship. I remember reading that when they decided to get married, Barbara, if you remember Barbara, Catherine's mom, pulled David aside and said, "She's got a screw loose, and I'm telling you, if you rub her the wrong way, she's gonna kill you." Super comforting thing to say on the day that you get married. And it turns out Barbara was right, because later that night, after making love 3 different times, Katherine tried to strangle David because he had fallen asleep after only making love 3 times, which I guess that wasn't enough for Katherine, and she felt that he should have been awake for a little more action. And I don't know, that's pretty rough. 3 times is pretty good. I think it's bedtime after that, but Katherine didn't see it that way. She tried to strangle and kill him, but this did not run David off. David wanted to test his endurance, I guess. So after he got Katherine pregnant, and I guess they were doing a little bit better, David went downtown for a good old darts tournament. That sounds like a good time. Not for Katherine. David went, he played his darts, he made it to the finals. Good for you, David. And when he got home, he was out a little too late, I guess. And Catherine had set all of his clothes on fire. Not only that, but she hit him in the head with a frying pan, fracturing his skull, and he walked over to the neighbors where he collapsed and had to go to the hospital. For some reason, whatever reason, and this is kind of the whole the whole story goes like this. Catherine never gets in trouble for anything that she does. So she's very abusive towards men. She does some super crazy stuff like fracturing someone's skull with a frying pan. Yet she does not ever see any repercussions from her actions, which is part of the reason why I think we make it to the murder of John Price, because Catherine was never held responsible for the other things that she did. So David got out of the hospital, found him a new woman, and he moved away from Catherine. Catherine was left alone with her child and started going a little bit more insane. So she took the child on a walk with the stroller. I guess she was like forcefully rocking the stroller back and forth like extremely violently, and people saw that, and she was admitted into the insane asylum. They said that she recovered and was released, but she didn't recover. She was released, didn't recover, because as soon as she got out, she went and put her baby on the train tracks, where she then proceeded to take an axe downtown and threaten a bunch of people. So she gets out of the insane asylum, gets her baby back, I don't know why, goes and puts it on the train tracks, gets an axe, goes downtown, and threatens to kill a bunch of people. So instead of sending her to jail, also the baby was saved. Some homeless guy was down there and saw the baby and saved her. But she gets admitted back into the insane asylum, where she checks herself out the next day. So I wish they would stop releasing this lady. She's obviously got a screw loose. Barbara was right. But she continues to get away with everything. So David, if you remember David, he heard about all this. David, you poor, poor, sweet man. He came back and he wanted to support Catherine in her mental recovery. Now, I don't know if he did this for Catherine or if he did this for his child. I would assume probably both, but more for the child. But he did come back, and he got her pregnant again. And then after having their second daughter, Catherine actually left David and moved away because she had found another David. So David number 2, David Saunders, comes into the picture. And these poor, poor Davids. I just feel bad for these Davids. David number 2 has it pretty rough also. So David number 2 started having some issues, violent outbreaks from Catherine and whatnot. And she actually, this is brutal to even say, she actually cut David's dog's throat, just a 2-month-old puppy, and told him, "This is what will happen to you if you cheat on me." So I probably would have gotten out at that point. I probably would have left, but not David. These Davids are pretty resilient. So David, he stuck around and got her pregnant. She seems to get pregnant pretty easy. So she's having her third child, and because David is a responsible man, and going back a little bit, She had also knocked him unconscious with a frying pan, so as of this point, her weapon of choice has been a frying pan, and she's pretty good with it. So Katherine had hurt his puppy, killed it, knocked him unconscious with a frying pan, and then he got her pregnant and decided that he needed to buy a house because dead puppies and frying pans aside, I guess that's just what a responsible man does. So he bought a house for Katherine and the kids. And I just want to read you the list of decorations that were in the house. And this was all decorated by Katherine. This is the literal list. We have pitchforks, rakes, old boots, machetes, leather jackets, rusty animal traps, animal skins, horns, and skulls, followed by Katherine's set of butcher knives that she liked to hang above her bed, of course. So that sounds like quite the array of decor. It sounds like a haunted house. But anyways, I guess David was okay with that. The problem is, not long after the purchase of the house, Katherine hit David in the head with a hot iron and stabbed him in the abdomen with a pair of scissors. I have never in my life heard of a woman getting away with so much violence. This is insane, because she still didn't see any repercussions from this. After that, David went into hiding. He had to quit his job, and after a few months, he wanted to see his daughter, so when he came over to see her, Katherine actually went and got a PPO against David under false pretenses because she was so mad that he had went into hiding and left. Katherine got pregnant by a guy named John Chillingworth, and there's not much about him besides the fact that they had, I guess, 3 years of dating, and she got pregnant by him, and that's kind of all it said, because after she got pregnant with John Chillingworth, John Charles Thomas Price comes into the picture. And this is our victim in the case. John Price was born on April 4th, 1955 in New Wales. He was the father of 3 children when these two met, and he had recently gotten out of a marriage. He was considered to be a terrific bloke by everyone who knew him. So it really does sound like actually that John Price was a good guy. His younger daughter lived with his ex-wife, but his 2 older kids lived with him, which means when Knight moved in, if my math is correct, it was a family of 8. So you had Katherine, 4 kids, John, 2 kids, and John. And John described the relationship as a bunch of roses, aside from the violent arguments. I don't know how a relationship can be like a bunch of roses and also have a bunch of violent arguments. But hey, it sounds like John was a pretty nice guy, so maybe he was looking at, grass is greener on the other side type thing. The only thing is, John did not want to get into another marriage. So when he refused to marry Katherine, she took a video of old items that he had from work, said that he stole them. Turns out he got fired from his job, which he had worked at for 17 years. And after that, the two had an on-again, off-again relationship up until February of 2000, when Katherine would stab John in the chest with a knife. He didn't die. This didn't kill him. But he did finally kick her out of the house. On February 29th, after he was recovering and feeling a little better from getting stabbed in the chest, which again, I just don't understand how someone can get away with this much stuff. Anyways, stabbed John in the chest. John kicked her out. He went and filed a protection order on February 29th, and he told his co-workers and friends that if he was not at work the next day, that it was because Katherine had killed him. John was right. He was never going to go back to work. That was John's last day on Earth. So after his friends begged him not to go home because they knew how crazy Katherine was, he still went home. And he went home and found an empty house because Katherine had sent the children off to a sleepover, supposedly. So Katherine went to, I don't know, it doesn't say specifically where she was at the time, but he got home, empty house, went over to his neighbors, he had a few drinks, came home, and went to bed around 11 o'clock. After John went to bed, Katherine came home and had randomly bought new black lingerie that day. What a coincidence. And so the two of them made love. I guess John thought everything was okay and felt safe enough to go back to sleep, but he should not have. John never arrived to work, so around 6 a.m., John's boss sent a coworker over to his house along with the police to see what was wrong. And what they found is literally insane. So the police came in, broke down the door, and Katherine was completely out of it. I guess she had taken a bunch of pills or something. But beside Katherine was John, and John had no skin. Why did John have no skin? Because she had cut it off with the butcher knife. And it gets even crazier. I guess the blood evidence stated that John had ran through the house and was stabbed while trying to run away, ran outside, got dragged back inside, and finally died from the 37 stab wounds that he had in his body. She then skinned him, hung his skin up from the opening in the living room, and proceeded to decapitate John's body. But wait, it gets even crazier. I think all of this lady's anger and insanity came out in this very night because the stuff that she did is insane. Next, after decapitating him, she took parts of his body and cooked it or baked it with sides of baked potato, pumpkin, beetroot, zucchini, cabbage, squash, and gravy. Then Katherine put that stuff out on plates and put his children's names beside the plates. So do you understand what is happening here? John gets decapitated, he gets skinned, his body parts get cooked, and she is going to feed him to his children as some morbid act of revenge, which is just mind-boggling to me. They also found John's head in a pot, and it was still warm from being cooked with other vegetables. I mean, the insanity and how gruesome this was is beyond anything I've ever experienced or read about. I also found this super disturbing, and I'm not gonna read everything that was on this because when I say disturbing, I mean sick. But she left a note on a picture of John, and it began with, "Time got you back, John, for R word, my daughter." Now, this accusation was completely false, but I just find it horrific to think that she needed to defile the memory of this man that she had just killed, skinned, cooked, and ate. That's just pure evil that she would find the need to do that. Now, these accusations were totally false. She was just trying to harm his memory even more. So following all this, Katherine was obviously arrested. She tried to plead guilty to manslaughter, which was denied. And so after pleading not guilty, they started preparing for a trial in October of 2001. But after jury selection, Katherine Knight decided to plead guilty, and it has never been discovered why she pled guilty, because she has never taken responsibility for her actions, and she says she has no memory or recollection of the incident that took place. But she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which would obviously explain all of the violent outburst and jealousy and control type issues. Not that everyone is like that has that, but for the most part that's the symptoms of borderline. So after she pled guilty, the judge decided to give her life in prison without the possibility of ever getting out, he said. And after Katherine appealed this decision, the judge wrote her and said, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society." What do you expect, Katherine? You had gotten away with a ton of violence in your life. Not saying you had the best childhood, but it doesn't justify skinning and cooking a man alive. So, that is the story of Katherine Knight, John Price, and all of the craziness in between. Like I said before, I've never quite heard anything like this, especially the wanting to feed the dad to the children as a form of revenge. I've never quite stumbled across anything like that. So, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. It's much appreciated. If you want to hear about some more crazy, spooky love stories, then I will be bringing those to you. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a spooky day.